And that's Galway Girl on BBC Radio Merseyside. Now, if you like your thrillers, I'm sure this next guest will be of great interest to you. JP Maxwell's written a fantastic historical thriller about Liverpool and its part in the American Civil War, and the novels received praise from local actor David Morris. He's got a great accolade on the cover. John's here now to tell us a bit more about it and his appearance. He's doing an evening at Waterstones on the 5th of February. John, how are you?
Very good, my friend. How are you?
Well, really good. Well, congratulations on the book. This is your first one, and it's gone down really well, hasn't it?
I'm stoked, really. Yeah, it's great to get it out to people in front of eyeballs in Liverpool and further afield. Yeah,
it's an incredible story, you know. And I knew a little bit about this because I've dealt with historians in Liverpool. But you describe yourself as having a passion for the more scandalous aspects of history, and you can tell it by the book. But I mean, I bet you there's people who don't know that the American Civil War, the last act of the American Civil War, was here, wasn't it?
Right here, yeah. If you Google it, it commonly says they surrendered on the Mersey. It was a ship called the CSS Shenandoah, which was built in Glasgow, but actually came in. It's a book in itself, that, but they came into the Mersey, and the captain James Waddell famously walked up the steps of the town hall and surrendered.
Wow. I mean, how long have you been working on this? Is this one of them? Because you've done all kinds of stuff. I was looking at your CV. You've studied Russian at uni. You worked in a Californian software company. You've done all kinds. So has this been on a back burner for a while, thinking I'll get to that?
It's one of those, isn't it? It's that everyone says they've got a book in them, and this was that thing that was sitting there for years on years. I originally wrote it because I used to produce films. I still do sort of dabble with it a little bit with screenwriting, but I wrote it as a film treatment years ago. I think about 15 years ago. Did a bit of research on it. I've always been fascinated. It's almost kind of in the urban legend, this thing about Liverpool and the American Civil War and the Confederacy, and obviously the links with the slave industries as well. So,
of course, yeah.
And this built, and eventually, like many of us, pandemic, boom. What am I going to do? You know, rattling my fingers on the table. I know, I'll pick this up, and I'm so glad I did, because ever since then it's just been an absolute labour of love.
Is it difficult to land a really good story between fiction and history? It's a skill, that, isn't it?
It's one of the main challenges of doing it, because you're kind of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You know, people are very much into historical accuracy, but in order to make it fictional and to make it work and to bring all these elements together,
you need a license to do it.
Absolutely, because in real life, you know, one thing's happening over there, another thing's happening over here, and they don't always connect. But in fiction, it kind of has to connect. So, but having said that, everything in the book has sort of got a basis in real things, even the characters and the events.
Well, it's got everything in the book. There's spies, there's espionage, there's murder, it ticks every box, doesn't it?
Absolutely gone for it. I mean, in that sense, it's a historical thriller. Some people have said it's got kind of echoes of a western, and I think in a sense, because Liverpool's story is an American story, and everyone, there's still that feel now, even walking around the streets now. Back then, especially, you know, it's an American, it's an Irish story. So, yeah, you know, that connection with the Wild West is there in that sense. You know, it's got that sort of structure.
Are you conscious, John, when you're writing it, that there are people who probably never been to Liverpool who are going to read this book? Are you conscious of that? Because you can't get too local and parochial about it, can you?
I think this is kind of echoes the city, really. I think, you know, this is what we've been about for a long, long time. But I mean, what hit me about back then is we were a super city. I think people can't quite grasp how big we actually were.
Well, we were a big money city at that time, weren't we?
It was one of the richest cities in the world, the richest port in the world. It was in terms of population, it was coming up to twice the size it is now. It was smaller in geographical sense, but in terms of population, people were living on top of each other. So you had this kind of almost kind of Brazilian favela thing where it was rich and poor right next to each other in the city, and that fascinated me. So yeah, I think in the sense, I was only walking down the dock wall a couple of days ago, and I saw the plaque. It was 1.3 million Irish came through that part of the docks, and some of them travelled on, some of them stayed in the city. And you can see the enormous diaspora, not just of the Irish, the other ethnicities as well, who have come through the city, and that maps out to all parts of the world. So in people's own family tradition, when they're talking these stories that get passed on from generation to generation, happens in this city, but happens in other parts of the world as well, and that's really influenced what I've done with Water Street.
Well, David in Prescott's been on. He said, "Morning, Sean. I really enjoyed the book by J.P. Maxwell. It also included 5 well-known Liverpool characters: Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, and Starkey. Is that right?"
Yeah, they just
Who were they?
Yeah, it's just. Well, I tried to throw people with the old Starkey thing, but
yeah, of course.
I'm fascinated with names, etymology. I'm fascinated with how that works because, and I expect Liverpool's a great place for that. Just how names change, because of course in the 19th century,
Ringo wasn't about for a start.
Ringo wasn't a name, but the kind of the way we speak as Scousers is it's derived from North Wales, but it's also derived from Ireland as well. Our kind of Scouse patois. But it's the way we speak being the operative word. Reading wasn't necessarily a big thing. It wasn't a thing for the masses back then. So, people's names would change. You'd had like Irish names that have been anglicised in different ways. So McCartney, for instance, came from McCarthy. It was just someone in some customs official probably just spelt it wrong. And it's these little things that kind of come through it, like you scan through. I'm fascinated by it.
Wow, isn't it incredible? How long did it take you? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of research that goes into this type of thing. I'm sure you knew a lot of it, but because you lecture in this, don't you?
Yeah, I lecture in screenwriting and digital writing at LJMU, so I've got an academic side to it as well, and there is a process, there's a craft. One thing I'm massive on, I'm really into, and I find one of the most enjoyable parts of it is the research side of it. Almost kind of in a weird way at both ends of the book, because while you're writing the book and before you're writing the book, you're sort of like doing the spade work for it, but afterwards you're finding out new things. So there's stuff I'm finding out now that's channeled into the next book, which is the next in the series based around the same era.
Right. I mean, you could do a whole series of books around Liverpool's heritage and history, couldn't you?
Absolutely.
It's incredible, isn't it, really? I mean, storytelling's difficult. What mistakes do we make? You must read a lot of books and see a lot of books and people sending you stuff. And what mistakes do we make as writers or potential writers when we're writing a book?
I think a lot of it is about confidence. I say to my students, and it sounds maybe a bit trite, but just go for it. We put barriers up in front of ourselves as writers, and I do believe in this thing. Everyone's got a book in them in a lot of ways. Everyone's got their own story to tell.
Yeah.
So
telling it's the secret, though, isn't it?
Just I would say, something I do, and it helps me to write it. George R.R. Martin, who famously wrote the Game of Thrones book, said you're either an architect or you're a gardener, and that meant if you're a gardener, you're someone who just goes for it, just sits there, blank page, just lets it happen. If you're an architect, you kind of build it so you have structure. And I think I'm a sort of bit of both. So I like to use sort of index cards to kind of know where I'm going in the story, and that does help to write it. Doesn't mean it can't change. It probably will change, but I think as human beings, as much as writers, we need to have that sort of confidence before we sit down and write something. It's a big part of it. So I'd say, do the research. Make sure you're writing about something that you're interested in. That's a big thing, and go for it and try and get some idea of the structure.
So you've travelled as well. That helps. That's got to help, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't your new one of your new books called Camper Van Woman?
Yes, yeah, Camper Van Woman. Yeah, again,
that's based on your experience of travelling, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Camper Van Woman's is more contemporary. It's in this sort of spy milieu, so it's sort of set in kind of Liverpool of the early 1980s, which we know. I even get a feel in the pit of my stomach even talking about that era, which I really wanted to address because I think it's a big part of our story as a city, but also kind of going further on to the more recent things like Brexit and the way we see ourselves, our identity. I'm really into that, and I think the whole sort of espionage story it's a good carrier for that, because with espionage you sort of associate yourself with certain places and themes, and the idea of nationality and where you're from and where your background. I think this is a great way to sort of carry that and bring this forward and have a debate. So Campervan Woman's sort of like Water Street in a weird way. It's because it's set very recently. It's about a kind of retired MI6 spy who just can't, you don't retire really. They keep coming back after you, and she travels around Europe in a camper van with her dog, hoping for a bit of peace, and of course she never gets it. So yeah, that's what's behind that. Again, it sort of maps back to my experience with being at the London School of Slavonic Studies, because that was sort of known as the sort of spy school. Of course, I didn't turn into a spy, but I would say that anyway, wouldn't I, Sean?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't. You're a poor spy if you're telling me about it,
Absolutely. So, yeah.
But just give me the gist then of Water Street. The gist of it, what it's about, obviously without any plot spoiler.
Well, Water Street is about a Confederate commander, Bannister Dunwoody, who comes to the city with two aims. Firstly, to build ships for the Confederate Navy, something that actually happened here, and he brings over his wife with him, and his wife's sort of quote unquote maid. It turns out his wife is actually spying on him and is trying to sabotage him. So all the way through, there's a sort of question of whether he's gonna rumble her, really, and see what she's up to. But it goes a little bit further. He tries to bring Britain into the American Civil War, again something that history would have been very different but for one or two little things. So this is sort of moving into that territory as well. So it's all the tension all the way through. The central character is Harriet Dunwoody, or Harriet Farrell, and it's how she tries to subvert her husband.
Yeah, it is one of the books that gets you thinking about what might have happened if things had been different, and I love that. Absolutely,
and I mean, again, even since writing this, I've found out so much stuff about how Napoleon III wanted to join the war on the side of the Confederacy. There was a big problem with the United States in terms of, and it turned out to be true, how powerful the United States became. It is the most powerful nation on earth now. Back then, there was a concern within very, very powerful corridors of power here that America, the United States, was going to become the most powerful nation on earth, and of course that led to some people thinking it would be a good idea to back the Confederacy for all their support of the slave trade and how that underpinned everything.
Well, as you said before, we had a strong financial and political connection with this, didn't we, as a city?
Money talks. Money talks, and I think, again, it's hard for people to maybe see that right now, but the city of Liverpool at the time was one of the richest places on earth. Cotton underpins this book in a big way, that being one of the molasses, tobacco, rum, but cotton was
the big one.
It was King Cotton. They called it King Cotton, and that was directly linked. There was a cotton drought in the 1860s that meant that the southern ports were blockaded by the Union, and that's why they wanted to build ships here. So there was a lot of support for the Confederacy here. There was some support for the Union as well, but there was a sort of spy battle going on in the streets of Liverpool that was connected directly to the American Civil War.
Wow. What I like about it as well, it's a good looking book. Did you design the cover?
I did the cover, yeah. We had a lot of back and forth on that, but I put the cover together.
Must be difficult, you must have so many ideas, but it's really, it's almost like it could be about the original Ripper. Looking at that,
yeah, absolutely.
It's a fascinating story, a brilliant story on the cover by David Morrissey with a great accolade, a gripping adventure, beautifully written. Jeff Young, the Costa Award nominee. Where can we get it?
You can pick it up off. You can pick it off most bookstores. Waterstones, Liverpool one will have it. On that note, quick plug. On the 5th of February, I'll be doing an evening conversation with me in Waterstones, Liverpool one. That's from 7:30 on the 5th of February. The usual outlets, one beginning with A, but I'm here to plug the Waterstones one. But yeah, you can get it in most places.
And if you want to go to Amazon, it's a long way, but you can get it there as well.
Jeff Bezos himself, he's handing them out in Paddy's Market.
So tickets are £3. Don't miss this. £3 and £2. Go and see John. Great author, a great talker as well, as you've heard, a great historian. And I look forward to the Campervan Woman. And I don't know whether you want to talk about it, but there's another thing in the pipeline you've got with a strong Liverpool link. So we'll look forward to that.
Thank you. Yeah, the next one's about the Lincoln assassination. In the some of the same characters as Water Street are going to be reappearing, and it's about how Liverpool, there were people here who helped to finance the Lincoln assassination.
God, what do you read?
Good archives, all kinds of mad stuff. Really, I've come across a 6 million word archive recently. A guy whose ancestor was a major shipbroker, and it's mind blowing, the stuff that just appears. You can find out. It's kind of like Richard III, really, the whole thing with Richard III. And it was like a lady who sort of started finding this stuff out, and then actually taught the academics how to find this guy. It's that there is, if you look far enough, history is at your fingertips, even more now in the data age. That it's possible to find stuff out, and that's what I've gone looking for.
Absolutely. You got a website we can go to?
Yeah, it's jpmaxwell.art.blog. jpmaxwell.art.blog, and it's got all kinds of stuff on there: trailers, latest news, details of my books and everything.
Best of luck with it, pal. Great to see you.
Thank you, Sean.